Paul?
All four candidates were invited. All four candidates were invited 2 times by email. Only Hugo and Christina responded. Christina responded 2 days ago to say that either she or a representative would come to the meeting. Hugo responded saying he would attend, and he is here. I can't answer for the other candidates.
Okay, we've got 20 of us here, so it's going to be quite a useful session regardless to hear from Hugo. And can I just say over to you, Hugo, if you want to just...
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Okay, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's the way of these meetings these days, isn't it? That you have to say that. What I thought it might be useful is if I'd just speak for 10 minutes and then shut me up after that. And then really, as I'm the only one here at the moment, it'd be an idea for you to ask me whatever questions you wanted, and I can see if I can answer them for you. So, you know, that might be the best way to deal with that, if that's okay with you guys. You know, it's your meetings. I think the more time you have to ask questions, the better, really. So I'll just start off just to say, I have been elected onto the NEC since 2015 onto the male black members seat. I've had other national experience as well. So I've been on the National Schools Committee, well, apart from a couple of years, ever since it was set up. I've also on the National Black Members Committee now as a result of my role on the NEC. So that's some of my national experience. I'm also on the National Local Government Service Group Executive as well, as a result of being on the Schools Sector Committee. And so I have some national responsibilities now as a result of that. And hopefully I've been making sure that we, you know, I put members' views first in all of those committees and members' interests first on all of those committees. My experience as a UNISON activist, though, goes back to the NALGO days when I first became involved in local government in 1984. I think I joined the council, the Greater London Council, in 1984 and became a NALGO rep in 1985, early 1985, and have been a rep ever since then. I was the branch secretary for a while for the ILEA NALGO branch in the London Education Authority, for those of you that don't know that particular acronym. And then in 1990, I transferred to Camden, where I became the schools convener there. And my role as the schools convener in all that time has been to make sure that we increase, obviously, the number of members that we have in the department, to make sure in particular that we fight on behalf of, as probably many of you know, what is historically a low paid sector, particularly of women, and to make sure that we get increases in pay in that area. So I've run a number of pay campaigns, regrading campaigns, to increase the pay, firstly, of nursery nurses and teaching assistants. And finally, we ran a campaign most recently of school meals staff, where we were able to increase their pay from the national minimum wage, I think it was something like £7.50 or £7.80 at the time, to the London living wage of £10.15 or so, that it was at that particular time. It was around about a 25% increase for, probably more actually, close to 30% increase for quite a large number of low paid women workers. And that was a really successful campaign for an area of the workforce that has been privatised by the council, been privatised a long time ago by the council, and we were still able to win a big wage rise for them. And of course, coupled with obviously those improvements in pay for people, we've made sure that we've tried to make sure that people are organised as well. In my view, there's no point increasing the membership if at the same time you're not also increasing their ability to be represented on the shop floor, but also to have their say in the union wider. So that's my experience, and I want to use that experience that I've had to transform UNISON into a fighting democratic union. I think all of us will probably agree we've had 10, 11 years of austerity, And I particularly think that our union has failed to meet the challenges that our members face over that 10, 11-year period. We've seen pay freezes, we've seen redundancies, we've seen cuts to our public services. And throughout that time, we haven't, as a union, been able to resist that on a mass scale, even though I believe that the governments that have been pushing that forward were weak governments and governments that could have been completely pushed back on the question of austerity. If you think we had a coalition government to start off with, and then we had a Tory government with a small majority, which became even smaller. And as a union, we failed to push back on any of the issues that have faced our members. And we've made a particular mistake during the pensions discussions in 2011, in my view, where instead of continuing with a struggle that involved 2 million public sector workers, we decided to reach a compromise that meant that our pensions, and I mean, ours weren't as badly off as a result of that as many of the other public sector workers who were involved in that action, but it meant that we had a worse pension settlement as a result of that, rather than standing to fight. And I believe that over the next few months, never mind the next 5 years, that over the next few months, our union has to radically change, and it has to do that on 2 grounds simultaneously. It has to come up with a set of fighting policies that our union activists in particular believe is going to give them a strategy to win. So no longer do people see union work as just a hard, relentless slog that's really the business of a few sort of a few nerds really, who like to get involved in some of the legal niceties around employment law, etc., but is seen to be something everybody can get involved in and start to organise around. So I think it's absolutely important that we do those 2 things, that we make sure we have fighting policies on the one hand, and on the other hand, we build up our activist space so that we're in a position to challenge, and we have to do those things both at the same time. We know that local government faces a major crisis. So in England alone, you've probably all seen the figures, local government faces a £10 billion deficit at this moment in time. And that's as it was during the summer. It's probably got worse now, and probably will continue to get worse with the new lockdown that's been announced just at the weekend. And that deficit means that our funding will, for local government services, will start to decrease. Now, the union, quite rightly, in my view, has started a sort of a public campaign around that, and has started a petition. Again, I would urge everyone to make sure they sign it, make sure their colleagues sign that public petition. But we know a petition in and of itself is not going to be enough to win the £10 billion back from the Tory government we desperately need for our public services. And there are 2 issues here. I know on the ground, we have many of our members that want to organise a fight back, that want to organise industrial actions to defend their job, pay, terms and conditions. And we've seen in the borough that I live in, for example, in Tower Hamlets, we've seen them take on a Labour mayor who's sacked and re-engaged the whole workforce in that borough in order to make ends meet. And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a minute. But it's absolutely essential that where our members want to fight, that they find our industrial action procedures are easy to navigate and enable them to take action to defend their pay terms and conditions. Unfortunately, that's not been the case over the last few years, where obstacles and barriers are put in the way of our members that want to fight on the ground. And when they decide to fight, by the way, we have to give our maximum support to those members in those particular battles. We have to make sure that we're singing those struggles through the rooftops, so that we make sure our members win. And again, no barriers put in people's place, which again, I know from bitter experience in our branch, where we wanted to raise strike funds, etc., etc., etc. We were not allowed to do that without the national say-so. That can't be right. We need to be able to maximise the support that we give to our members once they start in struggle. But I don't believe that that's enough, just encouraging our members at a local level to take action where they can. Because those that are in confident branches will find it easy to do. And those in branches where there isn't the confidence will just find that their terms and conditions are attacked. And so we need to be able to nationally organise our union to take national action against the cuts that we face and to win back that £10 billion to make sure that our councils don't face that deficit. And it's absolutely essential that we do that. Our union conferences have not been allowed to discuss the question of whether we can take national action. It's always been ruled out of the national conference. If I was General Secretary, that's one of the first things that I would do, is allow our branches to be able to discuss a plan and a strategy of how we can take national action to win back that £10 billion. And I know I was part of a campaign where we'd been continually told in schools that we couldn't take national action against the funding cuts that the government were proposed. And we kept on coming back to it, and we kept on coming back to it. And in the end now, we know that we are allowed to take national action on school funding cuts. Indeed, we had our first indicative ballot, which I was pleased to be able to propose at the National Schools Committee and also at the Local Government's Service Group Committee. We were able to take that action as a result of it. Now, the legal aspect around that, I cannot see why we can't be allowed to do that in local government as well. But yet we have been refused to have that discussion at our local government conference. So we must do that. But the other thing that goes alongside that is, what are we doing to the political representatives? How are we trying to engage support in the political representatives for a strategy that can win that money back? And I believe that we should be supporting no cuts councillors, particularly Labour no cuts councillors. We should be asking and demanding that Labour councillors make no cuts to their council budgets as part of an organised and coordinated national campaign. And I also believe, I'd go even further than that of asking them, I also believe that where there are local community campaigners who have got a record on fighting cuts, whether it be for a particular service that they've got, and they're prepared to go into the council chamber to say that they're not prepared to make cuts, I think that rather than giving our money to Labour councillors, that we should be prepared to support those candidates in those elections who want to stand up for our services, to be able to stand up for our services in the council chamber if they give that commitment to us and want to continue to work with us at a local level as well. So I think that that is particularly important. I also believe that we need to massively improve our organisation on the ground. You know, I say that I do not believe that you can just ask someone to become a rep and that they will just become a rep. You guys have probably got experience of that. There are some people who you have to go back and ask time and time and time again. And we also know that, yes, there are a lot of committed people who then will stick it out, but there are a lot of people that burn out after a year or so because they can't see where it's going. And that's where I believe the fighting strategy is an absolutely essential part. If we believe our union's pushing forward and going forward, I think we will hold on to and recruit more people who want to be representatives of this union. And I would lay down a challenge. Within the first couple of years, I would want us to at least double the number of shop stewards that we have in the workplace, in the workplace across the union. I believe that the figure is that we've got less than 20,000 representatives of a union that has 1.4 million members. You can do the maths yourself. You can see that that's way too short. We've got several thousand workplaces that we have to cover as well. We do not have enough people that even cover the number of workplaces that we have across the country. So it's got to be an absolutely crucial part. And I would want to see the amount of funding that branches get increasing to make sure that branches are able to do that work of recruiting and training shop stewards on the ground. Now, I also believe that we have to make sure that our union is as democratic as it can possibly be. In fact, it should be a beacon for the rest of the Labour movement. And I particularly believe that our branches should be able to speak to each other and campaign. Let's take a look at the pay claim that we've just gone through. We've had a pay claim where there was no campaigning done amongst the members in the first place. The campaign material was lackluster. There was no information really put forward for what was a decent claim, 10%, to aim to recover some of the money that we've lost over the austerity years. But there was a lackluster campaign, and that's not good enough. We can't do that. But then there wasn't even a recommendation for us to reject the 2.75% that was way below the amount that we put in as a claim from the NJC committee. That, in my opinion, is not good enough. And we saw what happened in the Northwest in particular, where the Northwest Local Government Committee made that recommendation to reject the claim. And they had a very strong turnout of rejection in their region. I think they were the only region that actually rejected it. I know in our branch in Camden, we also put out a rejection of that, and we got a very good turnout in that ballot to reject that particular offer that was put forward by the employers. And I'm saying, why can't branches get together and campaign in that way if they want to? At the moment, that's not allowed in our rules if you do it outside of the official structures. I've got no problem with branches democratically deciding that they want to speak to another branch or they want to campaign with another branch in whatever way, shape they want to do. And that, in my view, should be allowed. But at the moment, that's not allowed within, not even within the rules, but because of diktats that have been made from headquarters. And so I think it's absolutely essential that we turn that around. If I was General Secretary, I'd make sure that that was turned around and that branches can democratically decide. Of course, there's got to be a mandate from the branch, but democratically decide to campaign on whatever issue they want to campaign, as long as it's within the, obviously, the aims and objectives of the union, that they can do that democratically and make sure that they come together. Just my last couple of points, really, because the final part is about democracy in the union in terms of who represents us. And we get to vote once every 5 years for the General Secretary position, the most senior official in the union. Well, I don't think that's good enough. We're a union of 1.4 million members. I believe we should have more democratically accountable officials, paid officials in this union. In fact, I would ultimately go as far as to say that every paid official should be democratically elected. But I think in the first instance, I believe that we need to have the Assistant General Secretaries and the Regional Secretaries elected by members of the union, because I think that's the basis on which they're held accountable to the decisions that members make, and don't go behind the board and behind the scenes and try to overturn decisions that have been made one way or another, or use their power and authority to rule things out of order before, thus stopping branches from being allowed to discuss those issues. So I think we must make sure that we've got more elected paid officials in this union. And I would also say that I think the amount of money that representatives get for being in those top jobs, the General Secretary post, I believe, is in the region of 138,000, 140,000 pounds a year. Well, I'm not standing in this election to be the CEO of UNISON. I'm standing to be a workers' representative in this union. And therefore, I'm not prepared to take the additional £100,000 plus that job would offer. I believe that I make a pledge that I would stand on a worker's wage. I would continue to take the salary that I take home at the moment, which is around about £38,000 a year, that I would keep to that salary. I would donate the rest of the General Secretary income that they would pass to me every month. I know that would be what would happen, but I would donate the rest of that income back to UNISON members' campaigns, welfare funds, strike funds, etc. And I wouldn't take that additional money, because, as I say, I believe it's important to be a representative, that somebody I've come from the front line, I want to remain on the front line and make sure I bring that back into the centre of the union. I started off by saying that I wanted to bring my experience from the grassroots into the heart of this union, right to the top of this union, and I'm prepared to make sure I do that. with the salary that that job commands as well. And I would retain being on a worker's wage. So thanks very much, and ask me whatever questions you like.
Can I ask a question? Yep, Hugo. I'm Kevin. Hello, in case you can't see me.
I can.
Right. Well, I'm an old hand in the union, really. Well, I'm a retired member now. But certainly going back, I can remember on several occasions when we've had industrial action, I've been the only person on a picket line seeing others going into work. And there is absolutely nothing more soul destroying than that. And, you know, obviously believing as I do in the union and the labour movement, I think we need a general secretary that reflects the views of the membership generally. And if you're putting forward the idea of more widespread industrial action, how will you ensure that the membership, in fact, will deliver on that? That's my first question. My second question is, how will you ensure that there's a legislation change to enable local councillors to fix illegal budgets? Because currently they're barred from that in law. Thirdly, my third question is in relation to the election of union officials. Union officials are clearly there to deliver the policies of the lay membership. We set the policies, they deliver. Now, how will you ensure that we'll be able to employ sufficient numbers on short-term 4-year contracts when, you know, they could very well be booted out and their experience goes with them? So I'll focus on those 3 questions, please.
Do you want me to take those chairs straight away? Yeah, cool, thanks. So the first thing is, how do we make sure that the membership come with us on questions of industrial action? I think when we've had, in particular, when we've had national ballots, actually even when we've had local disputes, we often get really, really good support. Even when I think back to that pensions dispute back in 2011, we had people in my area, I mean, I can't speak for everywhere else, but we had people in my area that took action that weren't even in the pension scheme because they could see the possibilities of what that action would mean. And so I think normally when there is action, it's quite enthusiastically supported. Of course, you do get people who won't support the dispute, and so therefore that organisation on the ground in terms of the number of stewards, the number of people who are prepared to do picket duty, what have you, does become quite a key question then, so that we can show almost as a force that there is going to be, you know, so anyone who wants to come into work can see actually that there's a big number of people who are actually supporting that dispute. So all of the work in terms of generating support for a dispute, I think, is done in the days leading up to the dispute or the months and weeks leading up to the dispute. But I think the other thing that's quite important as well is that you get 2 types of disputes. Sometimes people react because they're really angry about something that's been done to them and they want a stop put into it. And so that can be quite a defensive action, and people can be, you know, support can be generated on that level alone within a particular workforce and particular group. Or you get actions where people are determined to win something for themselves that they see as being just and fair. And, you know, when you have those 2 particular types of dispute, the key thing is winning hearts and minds in the run up to that. But then I think the other thing that's really important is that the members can see that they've got a strategy that can win them. Of course, you can't promise victory in every dispute, but they've got a strategy to win that dispute. And then the people that are helping them organise and negotiate on their behalf are also determined to see it through. And that's something I think, those two things around the leadership of the dispute and the backing of the officials in those disputes are very, very important things. I think those are things that have been lacking, certainly in terms of the pay campaigns that we've had recently, because I think people don't see that if we take a couple of days strike action that we're going to win anything significant. So I think we've got to make it clear that we're determined to win any dispute and that there's the maximum involvement in those particular struggles as well. So I think that's really, really important. On the question of local councillors supporting illegal budgets, well, I never said in my introduction that we should ask councillors to promote illegal budgets. It's possible at the moment for councillors to actually pass lawful no cuts budgets if they're prepared to show that the gap that there is between what they can spend, what they've been given to spend by the government, and the gap that they intend to spend can be breached, either through the use of reserves or through prudential borrowing. For example, I mean, borrowing rates at the moment are an all-time low. So to borrow money at this moment in time would be would cost councils very, very little in terms of interest payments at this moment in time. So it would be possible to bridge the gap. But even then, I know that that's not going to be something that a council could sustain for more than 2 or 3 years. And that's why it's important that if we're asking that of councillors, they are part of a big campaign, a broad campaign to push back against the government. I'll give you an idea. You guys have got the experience actually of what happened in Surrey around the 15% rise that was proposed a couple of years back by your Tory administration over social care. And actually, that wasn't what I'm talking about, but in a sense, it had a bit of an effect of that, in that the council said they were going to raise the rates by 15% to cover the social care costs, and they went ahead and they organised the ballot, etc. And that caused an absolute turmoil within the Tory party of their own councillors who were going to hike up the rates, the local council tax, by that amount of money. And the impact that that had on the Tory government was to find some way, it was through the back door, I appreciate that, of finding some way of giving them some additional money. And as I say, that's not the campaign I'm talking about where you say to people that we're going to hike up your rates. But I'm saying if we had a mass campaign of councillors saying, no, we're not going to do this, we're not going to pass on these cuts, we're going to defend our services, and we have mass meetings in the local community, in village halls, in town halls, etc., etc. We involve all the local trade unions as well in a campaign around that. I think even now, if only one council did that, that would cause an enormous problem for the government and probably force them to back down. It can't be guaranteed, but nobody's tried it. Look at Andy Burnham just recently. He made a big stink about the amount of money that Manchester Council weren't getting as a result of the lockdown situation there. And that caused turmoil within the government. So, you know, I think that if we were to do this, one council, a couple of councils, 3 or 4 councils coming together to coordinate that, I think that would be the beginnings of a big campaign across the country to win that £10 billion back. Otherwise, what are councillors doing? What are they? They're just cutting our members' jobs. They're making the cuts that we can't without getting. Actually, many councils are using their reserves now to plug all the gaps that there are in the council finances, and often they're using those reserves to pay out redundancy money. What a waste of money, when they could actually be using that to make sure that we have major campaigns across the country in councils for services. How do we recruit people on short 4-term or five-year contracts? Well, I'm not actually saying that we do that if we have elected officials. What I'm saying is that those officials, if they stand for those positions, if they want those positions, should be accountable. I wouldn't be in favour of us just giving them 4 or 5 year contract. But if they have to go back, like all of you guys have to, who are shop stewards, have to go back every so often to make sure that their mandate is renewed with the people that they're supposed to be representing. I don't think that that's any big problem whatsoever. Now, I think that enhances our democracy. That enhances the ability of the people who are taking on those particular roles and those particular positions.
Thank you, Hugo. I've got a list of 4 people in the queue at the moment. I'll start with Martine, then Colin, then Ginny, and then Paul.
Hi, Hugo. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Thanks very much.
Hi, Hugo. Well, first of all, good to see you. It's very disappointing the 3 other candidates didn't have the courtesy of attending or sending a representative, and I think it sort of sums up a problem. There's obviously clearly a lot of apathy within the union, which I think is very much the legacy of the last 20 years. And obviously, there's a big building job to do. We certainly do need a change of direction. I think you're right. I totally agree with your analysis. No, the 2011 pension dispute was a wasted opportunity. And if we had built on that dispute, we may not have ended up with a Conservative government now, quite literally. It could have changed history if we'd built that pension movement. Now, I'm really split. No, if you were the only candidate of the left standing, you'd have my vote straight away. Unfortunately, you're not. And that's my great concern. You're splitting the left vote. Paul Holmes has significantly more nominations than you from the region, I think the region stroke branches, I should say, about 49. So I've got a couple of questions. One, why should I vote for you, Hugo, when Paul Holmes is the far stronger candidate when it comes to trying to change the direction of the union, and it's got a real opportunity of winning? And my second question is, if either yourself or Paul did win the election, how would you take on the union, which has a bit like Jeremy Corbyn found out, the Labour Party actually worked against Jeremy Corbyn. So how would you deal with that? And I think it's going to be the same issue for Paul Holmes. Thank you.
No, thanks very much. And they're two excellent questions, actually. So is Paul a stronger candidate than myself? And it's true, he's got more nominations than me. In fact, I think he's probably got 3 times as many nominations as me, to be absolutely fair. So, that's a fact, and it's a fact that I have to live with. I would say that there were a number of those branches. If I was the only left candidate, I would have won those. In fact, there were a number of really close votes in some of the branches where I know people have reported back to me where I lost by 1 or 2 votes in the nomination decision that branches took, but I lost them and Paul won them. So that's, that's neither here nor there in respect. But is Paul the stronger candidate? And I think that Paul's campaign has a number of weaknesses in it. Paul's campaign, and I think unfortunately they could be crucial weaknesses. And I just want to quickly say that on past performance, there have been other splits, as it were, in the left, in inverted commas, vote amongst the membership. And of course, members may look down the list of branches to see if my branch is in this particular one or nominated a particular candidate, and that will of course have some sway. But I don't think that's a thing that fundamentally has the sway amongst members when they vote in these elections. They look quite carefully actually at what the candidate's record is and what they're saying in terms of dealing with the problems that are in front of the members. And I followed obviously Paul, Christina and Roger around the hustings, and I would have to say that Paul's key campaign strategy was about giving all the power back to the branches, Well, I do believe that branches need to have more power, more resources, in order to do the work that branches need to do. But Paul's slogan, for example, of 50% of the funds back to the branch, I wondered to myself, well, actually, we're also, whilst it's important that we have branches, we're also a national union. And as a national union, we have really failed to punch above our weight over the last 20 years, I would say. We've really failed to defend our members' interests. And to do that, we need to act as a national union. And I'm saying that absolutely clearly, that on the question of cuts, we need to act as a national union. Of course, we need to support branches with all of the issues that they face. But we have to have national policies that are going to deal with the problems our members face, because they're facing them in every branch. So disaggregating all our resources or half our resources into the branches, when at the moment, currently branches receive around about 25%, I don't think is a good strategy. I don't think it's a good strategy either to put to sell our national headquarters. I think that would be a complete and utter diversion. You know, and just for the sake of moving the headquarters from London to Birmingham, which Paul has made clear in his manifesto, I think it'd be a complete diversion. And actually, it's not the reason why members feel disenchanted with the union because of where the headquarters is. They feel disenchanted with the union because the union doesn't have the policies to defend their terms and conditions, their pay and their jobs. That's what really makes the union out of touch. So I think there are a number of weaknesses in the policies and the programme that he's putting forward. And I don't think he's been very clear during this election process, during this election, about what he, where he believes, what strategy he believes can win for our members. And I think I'm being a lot clearer. Of course, that would have to develop. Even though I've got a clear plan, that doesn't mean I'm going to ride roughshod over all of the democratic processes in the union. It's a question of having that consultation and discussion and decision making at a lay member level, giving people confidence that we can fight and we can win. But the second part of that question is, how could we take on the union? Because I think you're right, there are a lot of problems with the union. In my region, in the Greater London region, in the 2015 General Secretary election, there was widespread corruption amongst the officials during that election. It went as far as the certification officer having to make recommendations, finding against the union, actually not quite finding against the union having the election rerun, but pointing out some very serious flaws in the way in which the union officers ran the union in the London region. And one of those criticisms was about how when it was found out that wrongdoing took place, how that was investigated by the union. And that's not right. We need to make sure that we change that, that instead of it being a sort of like a friends club, the headquarters and the national officials, that actually if they're given a task to do, that they do it seriously on behalf of the members. And I'd be absolutely clear with that. But winning a general secretary position in and of itself wouldn't be enough. There would have to be measures would have to take place against some of the officials. For example, there were 2 officials who came over from the Labour Party who were named in that leaked report about the Labour Party, where there were accusations of racist and sexist harassment whilst they were in the Labour Party. I think we'd have to seriously review whether those people were fit to hold senior office within our union. We'd have to seriously review that. But the other thing that I think we have to do is make sure that that the left wins control of the NEC. And I make no bones about that, because that's the only other way that democratic control can be wrested from a whole set of people who I think have lost complete touch with the membership and have taken our union down a road that means that it's not up for the challenges that our members face over the next few months, as I say.
Thank you, Hugo. That was very informative.
Thank you, Hugo. Colin's next, then Ginny, then Paul. Right, have we lost Colin for the moment? All right, Ginny, do you want to go?
Hi. Just getting my thoughts together. Okay, a little bit of response to Hugo, to things you've just been saying. I mean, we are the biggest trade union, you know, in the UK, Hugo, don't forget that. And we did win that very big case last year. I think it was just at the end of last year. Was it the equal rights case? A terrific win through the courts that UNISON did to get, for women particularly, wasn't it, to get back pay. So we've got huge power and influence, I feel, as a union. And you said about to have the Assistant General Secretary and regional secretaries elected in order to let regions and branches make more decisions ourselves and to be able more to campaign. Well, I'd say, what about the NEC? Because that's our governing, they're the people who make the rules, well, not the rules, but they're the people who make decisions about national stuff. And NEC is made up of the likes of all of you guys there. I don't think it has retired members on anymore, but I hope you can hear all right. Can you, Hugo?
There was a bit of crackling just then, so I think your Wi-Fi went down a little bit. Sorry, Gina. I heard what you saying about the NEC.
Yeah, I just was saying that about having, you were saying about having assistant general secretaries and regional secretaries so that branches and regions can make more of our own decisions. But the point I was wanting to say was that the NEC make there where we've got a democratic body of our own workers to be there to govern and to make decisions. And then, yes, and you've just said we need to have the left wing need to win the power of the NEC to have the majority there, because you feel it's been led down the road in the wrong direction, but I'm not sure that we'd all agree with that. Let me just get my thought for this last question. Yeah, I think I was feeling, you've talked a lot about us being a campaigning union, but I know from the experience I had myself as a rep and as an officer, a lot of what we do and is important to do is to be a campaigning, but a negotiating union. And as much, I don't feel you're putting always the emphasis on the kind of negotiating. That's what we spend our lives doing a hell of a lot. And it's only when we're really up against it that we need to fight and campaign and fight and get people out. But you want to live in Surrey, because it's very difficult in Surrey to get people to come out on strike. And as Kevin already said, and I remember he was the only one on the outside his office in Leatherhead, and people would just look the other way and go in, or give him a nod and go in. And that was the case all around. We did have some success in schools at times and in some offices, but it was a minority. So we're not so keen.
Is it all right just to sort of
yes
wrap summarise what
Yes,
you
you want me to ask a question?
please.
Yes, I'm not
Thanks.
sure what the question is really, except yeah, the thing about the NEC and the thing about don't you believe in the NEC that there we've got the power and the democracy, and perhaps we don't need to have these elected regional secretaries, etc. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ginny. So, I mean, I started off by saying what some of my experiences locally in Camden were, and particularly that I was really pleased that we'd led 3 big campaigns. I've done other campaigns, you know, around stopping school closures, around stopping schools converting to academies, a whole number of other campaigns as well. Perhaps one of the things, I think that you always have to start from a position of strength, or at least start with an idea that you're going to be strong, because what you're putting forward is going to get people around you when I start campaigning. So of the 3 big pay claims that we won, only one of them resulted in a strike, which was the nursery nurses, which was back in around about 2000. The other 2 pay claims that we won, particularly the one against the private sector, yes, we mobilized people. And in fact, actually, in all of the campaigns, I can say, we started off with a minority of people in the workforce in the union. But we campaigned hard. We put forward the ideas that we needed to put, and we campaigned and we campaigned and we campaigned. And we showed a determination. And we said that if you don't do this, then our members will ballot for strike action. And in the case of the nursery nurses, they did. And we ended up with the council conceding on all of our demands on that one. But in the other 2, actually, we didn't get as far as strike action, because we were able to negotiate a decent settlement for our members in those. So yes, I do talk about action, because I find that once you start to mobilize people, once you think you've got the right idea and you convince people that if we go down this road, it may ultimately mean that we have to do this. So I'm clear with people straight away. I'm not saying my negotiating in fact, my negotiation tactics tend to be, I want this and you need to give it to me. And then I go forward and get people to support that. And the more and more people support it, then the more likely I'm going to say, okay, you've now given that to me, so I'm going to accept it. So, you know, and I don't think that that has been our strategies. In fact, I know it's not been our strategy. I mean, I've heard Christina on the hustings, for example, say that she's a very experienced negotiator, which I probably wouldn't disagree with at all. But she said that she's not to be prepared to make promises as General Secretary that she's not going to be able to deliver. And I think that's the wrong way round. I think that we find out from people, from members, what they want to do. We try and give that an organisational direction. We say, well, if that's what you want, these are the steps that we're going to have to do to get it and to win it. And so I'm not going to say that I'm going to promise the earth, but what I am saying is I'll listen seriously to what people say and then come up with ideas about how we win that. And of course, negotiation is an important part of it at the end of it. I don't think anybody is expecting us just to go on strike for no reason and then expect to win something. No, of course, negotiations are an important part of it. But I believe that you negotiate from a point of strength, not from a point of weakness, because I think if we do that, we do our members a disservice. I also make no bones about saying we need a fighting majority on the NEC. I do not believe that, yes, we have had successes as a union in the courts. No 2 ways about that. You know, we've had quite a successful dispute just recently around the Haringey care workers. You know, that's a really important dispute that we've won through the courts. We've won other things through the courts over the past few years. But actually, if we're only going to fight battles that we're legally on the right side of the law on, as it were, you know, we can prove legally that we have a position, then there are things that we're not going to be able to improve for our members. We're not going to be able to improve our members' pay with a legal battle, for example. You know, if we're going to, we have to do the other campaign inside as well. So of course, I'm happy that we've got some lawyers that have been able to take a very good position. I'd have to say though, on the ground, I think when our members want back in for a legal case, quite often actually, the individual members have been found wanting, and we've got several cases of where people have gone to independent lawyers and won tribunal cases where the union appointed solicitors have turned around and said they don't have a case. I know we've got experience of that in our branch, so I know that happens, and that's got to be something that we've also got to turn around as well. So yes, of course, we've got to explore all avenues to fight and to defend our members' terms and conditions. And I think, unfortunately, over the last few years, we've taken the safe option as a union and just gone ahead with fighting those battles that are legal battles that we can win, rather than really organising. No, it's not. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that is the easy work to do. You know, it's easy. Just go out, organise everybody, and everything will be okay. No, it's a hard slog. It is a really hard slog. Keeps me up at night sometimes. But we've got to be honest with ourselves. That's what we need to do if we're going to defend our members' terms, pay, and conditions over that period of time. We have got 1.4 million members. We could be a huge influence in the trade union movement. I don't think we're a huge influence for the right reasons, unfortunately, and I think we need to be. We really do need to be. I think our members deserve it.
Thank you. Colin.
Yes, thank you much to you. That's quite informative. Just one question, well, two in one really. If you become General Secretary, you need a wider vision than just the union. So how are you going to work with the Labour Party and also other unions to achieve a goal for the whole of the union, the trade union movement?
Okay, so I do believe it's important to work jointly with other trade unions, you know, where we can, and that we coordinate action. As I say, I'm the schools convener. UNISON members aren't the most powerful or the majority in most schools. It's not true in special schools, by the way, where we outnumber, you know, teachers sometimes 4 or 5 to 1. So it's a completely different situation there. But on the whole, where a minority, and I've had to work with the NEU or the NUT as it was, and actually I've had a very good relationship with the NUT in terms of working with them. In fact, I used to work very, very closely with the person who is now the NEU's General Secretary, Kevin Courtney. We used to share an office, and if we had campaigns, he used to be very good at making sure that his members backed our campaigns, and vice versa. We used to make sure that we backed their campaigns. So we did whatever we could, and where there were joint campaigns around cuts. So I've got experience of certainly working with another trade union and working powerfully. But we also have to say that sometimes we have to put our stall out there and say, this is what we think needs to be done. We need to have to get out there, and we have to do that. And I think that over COVID, for example, if I was General Secretary now, at this moment, I'd be calling a meeting, or I'd be asking to see all of the other General Secretaries, or whether we had to go to the General Council or whatever it was, to make sure we had a discussion, a serious discussion about lockdown and what needs to happen on 2 particular counts. A, make sure that schools are involved in that lockdown, particularly as far as closing them is concerned, and making sure that they remain open for essential workers and for vulnerable children. Because the evidence shows, and we've just been on a call this afternoon with the schools committee, the evidence is showing that where there have been these local lockdowns and schools have remained open, it's just been a rolling program of lockdown. It's not made any difference whatsoever because the schools have remained open. So I'd want to have a discussion with them about that and how we force the government to back down on that, and on the issue of making sure that test, track and trace is brought back into the public domain and is organised properly, is organised locally with the local councils and with the local NHS. So I'd want to have an immediate discussion with the other trade union general secretaries to make sure that we made that a priority campaign during lockdown, and we forced the government to back down over test, track and trace and bring that all back into being a public service and not the shambolic privatised service that it is at the moment. So I think that, you know, there have to be ways found to make sure that we do work together, and that's something that I do have experience of. On your question of the Labour Party, I think that's a slightly different issue, to be absolutely honest. I think our members' experience on the ground of the Labour Party, in particular Labour councillors, our members' experiences, and I know Surrey isn't a Labour council, but I know where we are in Camden, for example, and in inner London in particular, where we've got a whole host of Labour councils around the country. So I think many members' experience of Labour councils is they've cut back on services, and I think we have to be putting demands on those Labour councillors. Councillors are not going back. I have to say that we've got a political. We've got our Labour Link, our political fund that's affiliated to the Labour Party, and I think that that's not working. I think that what that does is the decisions that our Labour Link want to make are done often without any reference to what our conference policies are. And that's wrong, in my view. The conference policies that are decided democratically by the whole union should be sacrosanct, and those policies should be brought into the Labour Party for the Labour Party for us to make this, you know, to use that as our political voice. And it has to be that way around, not the other way around. But secondly, I don't think that we should, our members want our money to be given to Labour councillors in particular, or even MPs who are cutting back on public services and aren't defending the interests of working class people. And that's why I'd like to see our political voice opened up so that it's not just limited to donating to the Labour Party. As I said in my introduction, where there are people who've got a proven track record of fighting for local services, of fighting to defend local services, whether it be, you know, a community hall or a public service of one or another, then I think that we should do that whether or not they are Labour Party members. And I do worry, particularly with the decision that was taken at the end of last week, that the direction that the Labour leadership is taken at this moment is to roll back all of the positive things that were done during the Corbyn period in terms of many of the policies that were promoted at that time around opposing privatisation, about bringing services back into the public domain, about renationalising energy, renationalising the communications industry, the water industry, etc. I think there are a whole range of things that were very popular and that were very positive that were done. And I think we're in a process now where those things are going to be rolled back and rolled back. And we're starting to see that already before our own eyes. I mean, the issue that was taken the debate that took place in Parliament a couple of weeks ago now around the spy cops issue, about allowing the police to openly spy on trade unionists and stuff. And the Labour Party leadership said, no, we're going to sit on our hands on that particular issue. I personally don't think that's the way in which we should be, we shouldn't be putting our support that way, and we should be putting pressure on them to oppose those things vigorously.
Thanks, Hugo. Paul.
Thanks, Andy. Well, first of all, I just want to say, Kevin, I think, has left us now, but just to say something about what Kevin said about being the only person on a picket line. I would take my hat off, and I have said it to him before many times. We've all been there, been the only person or one of 2 or 3 people on a picket line, particularly in Surrey. And sometimes he reminds me of the guy with his shopping bags in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square. You know, sometimes you've got to be the person that stands there and makes a stand. But the reality was, on that day, we had some of the biggest demos we've ever seen in Surrey of trade unionists. We had hundreds of people on the streets at 4 separate rallies on one day in Surrey. So yes, there were examples of 1 or 2 people, but actually, in terms of the mobilisation of ordinary working class trade unionists in Surrey, it was a magnificent day and could have been built on, and we could have got a better result in the end. The second thing I wanted to do was just to read 2 messages which have been put in the chat from people that had to leave. One is from Kia, who says, "Great to hear from you, Hugo. You've definitely got my vote, as you've spoken nothing but sense since you've been on. Thank you for your time. Sorry, but I have to go now. Thanks to the branch for organising this session." And also from Jim Poyser, who says, "Thanks, Hugo. That was really impressive. Best of luck to you." Now on to my question. Our branch, every year we have our branch development activity and we come up with the priorities for that year. And over this last year, our #1 priority, and we've done a lot of work on it, we've linked up with some school students in Guildford over it, has been climate change. And it's really just to ask you, not obviously to go, you can't cover the whole how to save the planet in one contribution, but in terms of what difference you might make as a General Secretary in terms of the union's position on climate change.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for that. I mean, it's obviously one of the most important questions, and Paul's right, I can't cover how we save the planet in a couple of minutes, but I'll start with the big one in lots of ways, and that is that we actually do need, the only way we're going to save the planet is by having a plan that we agree on, which involves us having a plan of production, which involves us having control over that plan of production. And that's you and I and ordinary workers having a plan, a control of that plan of production. And without that, we're blowing in the wind a little bit, because how do we stop these big companies? These big companies, by and large, that are the ones that are the big polluters. It's not, you know, us who perhaps might buy the odd extra plastic 5p plastic bag that we need, or, you know, keep our central heating on a degree higher than it's necessary to be. We're not the ones causing the major amount of pollution, environmental destruction that's taking place. By and large, it's the big companies. And so I am a socialist. I'm not going to hide that from anybody. And I do believe that actually fundamentally we do need to have a socialist society where ordinary working people do control and have a democratic decision-making say in that plan of production, and how we make sure that the things that we produce are done in a sustainable way. But of course, that's a big thing, and I don't want to divorce from that big thing. I want to start with that big thing, because then there are things that we need to do to get into that particular road. Let's take one of them. We've got a lot of members who've been threatened with redundancy, who work, or cuts to their pay terms and conditions in British Gas just recently, where British Gas said that they were going to sack and re-engage people on worse terms and conditions. I actually believe those members who've got the experience in British Gas of producing energy, their jobs need to change around, so they're not producing energy from carbon fuels, but that they're being produced from sustainable fuels. And our members in that industry, in the whole energy industry, have got the experience and expertise to enable that change to happen, to move away from a plan of production using carbon and into more sustainable. And those people need to be guaranteed that their jobs, pay terms and conditions are going to be protected as we transition away from fossil fuels onto sustainable. And I believe that's an extremely important demand that we have to take up, that I would take up as a general secretary, because otherwise what are we saying? Fossil fuel industries need to go, your jobs are going to go. And so we pit people, the very people who've got the experience of being able to help us resolve this crisis, against the movement that needs to take place to actually resolve that crisis and causes divisions within our own movement. I think the trade unions also have to get fully behind this as well. and have to use that expertise there is to come up with a plan of how we would move to more sustainable energy. It needs to be done really, really quickly. And we need to listen to our members in those industries to make sure that can be done. Of course, there's all sorts of other measures that we need to take as far as sustainable energy production is concerned. But we do need to make sure that we take control over, you know, we have, and it can't just be in this country alone. It has to be an international plan of production. But that doesn't mean that we just sit in our hands and wait till that international plan comes forward. That's something that has to be done. Of course, I'm in favour of all measures that can be done practically now to move us away from, to move us into more sustainable, not just production, but also things like waste management, etc., etc. We have to do that. We have to make sure that our local councils have got the money to be able to support that. You know, how many stories do we hear of councils who are saying they're recycling, and that recycling ends up on a fly tip somewhere in a part of the developing world, and it's not actually being sorted out at all. So we have to make sure that our councils are rigorous around doing that, the public sector has an absolute role in doing that. And we have to demand those things are done now. So I'm in favour of any measures, but I also think that the trade union movement has got an absolute key. And, you know, our branch, to its credit, I know many other branches did this around the country as well. When young people were protesting around climate change, our branch made sure that we gave them as big a platform as possible and supported their demonstrations. And I think we have to do that. We have to, you know, those young people that are taking action around climate change, school students who went on strike, we've got to support them. We've got to make sure that also we're bringing them into our movement, because they, in a sense, they're using our methods of strike, etc., etc. And so we need to make sure that we give them the support that they need to continue that struggle and the demonstrations, etc. So yes, I think the trade union movement as a whole has got a big role to play. It's got a massive role to play in many ways in terms of the climate. And I would support all the steps that we can take to make sure that that's done.
Thank you. We'll take one final question from Isfan, and then we'll look for a little, just a sum up of your position for a couple of minutes, Hugo, on why you'd be asking for everyone to be voting for you. But if we could take Isfan's question next, please.
Just listening to the conversation, I think the National UNISON is in bigger trouble than actually I thought. If our biggest success is to win a legal battle over the last 10 years, I think we are in huge trouble. What it means, the last 10 years, we've gone through probably an unprecedented austerity and cuts, especially the public sector. And we haven't actually done anything about this apart from winning a couple of legal battles. I think it's unbelievable. If you think about, and I don't agree with Extension Rebellion, but a handful of people actually almost managed to stop complete Heathrow. Obviously, they were threatened with legal battles and stuff. I don't agree with them, but I think we should show our strength at times, and we haven't done that. If you think about UNISON is currently the biggest private sector union in the whole entire Europe, and we haven't actually shown our strength. If I was a Tory, if I was in government, I would be quite happy with what UNISON is doing right now in terms of not showing our strength, not showing our membership, really, and not mobilizing our membership. And also, don't forget, our kind of current stewards haven't experienced being on a proper strike, on a national strike, and I think that's a big problem. And for me as a convener, actually we're not going on strikes anymore, and that's not actually in our culture, and I don't think we should go on a strike on a daily basis, but at times, especially unprecedented times, I think we need to show our strength, and I think we're not doing it. And I'm just asking Hugo, how are you going to change this? How are you going to change that? Because we haven't done that for a number of years now, and I think people probably almost forgetting this.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I'm going to answer that in a sense, in a different way. I do think that I've explained that I think that the policies are the important thing. So the democratic discussions that take place within our union are absolutely the key things. And I think that people will have confidence if they believe that we've had a discussion where we think that we've come out with the right strategy at the end of that discussion, and that we pursue that strategy. Now, sometimes we don't always come up with the right strategy first time off from a discussion, but experience teaches us, and we learn from that experience, and we hope to implement it the next time around. You know, we learn from that. So I do think that the policies and the discussion are absolutely key to that, but we also have to make sure that we make sure that every time, and I'm sure you do it in your branch, every time anyone says boo to a goose in the workplace, that you say to them, you would make a good shop steward. Why don't you ask your workmates if you can become a good steward? So that we're actually not just talking the good talk, but we're organising on the ground as well. And so I do think that that twin plank of my election platform, I think, is a strategy that's going to help us to develop our strength over the next period. And I do think that we will have to use it. Again, I go back to my experience of organising in schools in Camden. So when we had our nursery nurses strike, I believe that the solidarity our members showed and the strength that they showed from having had, as I said, a minority of people in the union to start off with, to then effectively having a closed shop amongst nursery nurses in schools during that dispute, and actually for a whole number of years afterwards, meant that when we went back with some of our other claims, that the council thought twice about taking us on, and it made it easier for us to win those. And I don't think legal battles have the same edge to them, because a legal battle doesn't involve everybody, and it doesn't involve a massive number of people. It involves a small team of people working on behalf of the members. It's true, but it's not everybody. Everybody doesn't live through that experience, and they're important. But I do think us organising on the ground makes sure that we can do that. So I'm not pretending to say it's going to be easy. None of the things that I've been involved with at a local level or even at a national level have been easy, but they're things that we've had to come back to time and time and time again to make sure that we put those strategies in place, and that we show determination to see them through to the end as far as we possibly can, and that the members at the end make that decision about where we go next, whether to accept or reject. That issue around democracy, again, I think is absolutely key and absolutely essential. So it's just stuff that we've got to do. We've got to make sure that we do it.
That's great, Hugo. I mean, we sort of timed ourselves to 7 o'clock, so we're coming close to that. Just like to reiterate, our branch did support your nomination, and it's been a pleasure to hear from you. I think everyone would agree it's been very informative, and it's been a good platform for us to hear, the strategy of what you do if you're successful, which I certainly hope you are. Do you want to just quickly sum up for a couple of minutes, just to the wider membership, which we'll be putting out on our website, as to why you would hope that they could vote for you for the election? Thank you.
Firstly, I would like to say to the Surrey branch, I'm really grateful that you did nominate me to stand as a candidate in this election. I knew it was going to be an uphill battle from the very start to get the 25 nominations that were needed to stand in this election. So I'm extremely grateful that you were one of the branches that did nominate me, one of the 31 that did nominate me, and also that I got an endorsement from the National Black Members Committee as well. So I'm really grateful for that. And that's given me an opportunity to go to the wider membership and put forward my case for becoming the General Secretary. So I am very grateful for that you've done that. and also that I would ask, so obviously in the politest way possible, if any of you feel that you're able to campaign for me on a personal level, that you do that in your branch. Of course, you'll all be aware that you're not allowed to use union resources to campaign for me. So that means facility time, etc., etc., etc. But certainly do make sure, you know, I would ask if you could campaign, talk to your work colleagues, and go to my Facebook page, Hugo Pierre for UNISON General Secretary, and you'll be able to find some access to resources, etc., if you need some resources to campaign. So I am really pleased about that. I would like to say that the reason why I'm standing is I do believe UNISON members will face an absolute crisis point. They are facing it now, actually, in many workplaces, but in the next few months, they'll be facing a real crisis, I think, in local authorities, certainly up and down the country. And our union has to be fit to meet that challenge. Now, even if I was to become General Secretary on the 1st of January, because of this election, it's not going to happen immediately, but we have to make that change immediately to prepare ourselves to meet the challenges that we need to over this time. And so I would urge you, hopefully you've heard what I've had to say. You can read some more of my material as well about what I think about things like, you know, £15 an hour being the minimum wage, and anti-privatisation policies, how we would bring people together to fight to bring public services back in-house, a whole range of things. You can read through more of those things. I'd urge you to do that if you want to know more about my campaign, but to support me in this election to be a transformative General Secretary that really will make a difference to our members' lives over the next few months, which is going to be really important, but hopefully also over the next 5 years. So thanks very much for inviting me to come along. I'm sorry that I was the only one that you had speaking to you this evening, because I think it would have been quite useful to be able to compare and contrast my ideas with those of the other candidates. But I suppose you've been able to grill me in a bit more depth than perhaps if there'd been other people that have been there. But thanks again, both for nominating and for inviting me along to this hustings tonight.
Thank you.
That's a round of applause, Zoom style. So wish you all the very best of luck, Hugo. It's been a pleasure meeting you on Zoom, all the best. Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much, as I said, for inviting me, and I hope you have every success in your campaigns in the branch as well. You know, it's really good to see branches around the country and what they look like, rather than just being stuck in my little office in Camden. I'm never stuck in the office, but rather than just be operating out of the Camden branch. So thanks again.